Welcome back to the Badass Literature Society, where badasses come together to rate and review novels recommended by you. Hi, I'm Michael.
This is Barbara.
And I'm Lauren.
We're back for another bonus episode.
This month, we're going to be talking about our favorite and least favorite books of 2021.
So let's get into it. We're going to start, so we're going to, just to kind of give you an idea, the listeners, as to how this is framed, we're going to talk about our top 5 books and our bottom 3 books interchanged as we go. So we're going to start with your number 5 book of 2021.
Yeah, we're not going to go in any logical order whatsoever.
So my pick was 13, which was it's a Eddie Flynn series. It's number 4. And I was actually really impressed with this book. I liked the characters. I liked the story. It was fast paced. The plot of trying to figure out who, even though you already knew the killer, because you get his perspective, but actually knowing who it is like twisty and all the things I love. Really, really like this book, and I was pleasantly surprised, and I definitely want to read the rest of the series. I actually need to go and pick that up, and I think it's in my TBR to be read later sometime in my lifetime. Hopefully this year, we'll see. Just too many books to read, but that was my pick for my number 5.
So for me, my number 5 was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which was by V.E. Schwab. We read that for the podcast. I really enjoyed it. It was one of my top books of the year for all the reasons that I said in that episode. I've had an amazing story, amazing characters. I'll pretty much read anything V.E. Schwab writes because she's just that good of a writer. But yeah, that's my number 5.
Yeah, my number 5 is also a podcast read. Well, I guess it wasn't our podcast. It was a guest episode.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, it wasn't ours. Yeah.
I was thinking, oh yeah, it was ours because we got on and talked about it. But no, we were guests on a different podcast, The Sleeper and the Spindle, which is a Gaiman book. And like Michael said, I'd read just about anything from that author as well. It was kind of a spin-off of a fairy tale. So it was a twisted fairy tale, which I also enjoy.
That's like all the rage. Have you noticed that? Like, it's all the rage right now, and I feel like I have a lot of recommendations for you, Lauren, if that's what you like, from Book Talk, because there's a lot of new books that are coming out that is like that wheelhouse.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like exclusively what I like to read, but I really do enjoy the twisty fairy tale genre. I don't really know what you would even call
They
that.
call them retelling, like fairy tale retellings, I believe is what the genre is now being dubbed.
So like Cinder. I mean, I love that. And like this was, in that kind of realm. So I thought it deserved a spot in the top 5 because I enjoyed it. And the Audible version of this, just a shout out to the audiobook, was really neat because they actually had a full cast for it. And so there was like, instead of just one person doing weird voices, there were actually multiple people doing the voices for it.
Oh, that's cool.
So it was kind of like listening to a movie almost. But anyway, that's mine.
So with that, we're going to bounce to the other end of the spectrum and talk about our number 3 worst book of 2021. And for me, that was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. Book 1 in that series. And I want to say, like, I didn't hate the book. Like, I'm not putting it here because it's like, this is an awful book and I'm going to crap on it for the next 10 minutes. I liked it. It just wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, I guess. And I didn't read a lot of bad books in 2021, so this one ended up on the list. But yeah, that was mine for number 3.
So I'm curious if I should take that off my TBR list because I have not read that, but it is on my list.
I wouldn't take it off your list. I would say it's worth reading. Like I said, it's not an awful book. It's just not amazing either. And the TV show was better than the book when we watched that.
So remember when it was written, back when this was written, like everything that this book had was all the tropes that we used to love back then. You know, I can't remember when this came out, like 2007 or something like that. 2008, and it was like all the little tropey stuff that we liked in high school, you know, like the triangle love stories, you know, the first person's perspective, and like she didn't know she was magical, but she is magical, like all that stuff, like everything that we used to love reading back then. It just, I feel like it didn't, what is the word I'm looking for? It didn't That's it. It didn't age well for now. And I'll get into more of later, but yes.
Okay, well, maybe I'll have to give it a try still. We'll see. My number 3 worst book, because honestly, I didn't get to do much more reading than the podcast reading in 2021, unfortunately, with a young child. So I picked The Cuckoo's Calling for my number 3 worst book, and not because it's a super shitty book, but it does have a super shitty author, not talent-wise, just human being-wise. We've touched on that before. I also feel like, kind of like you said, Barbara, about the Shadow and Bone book, just that The Cuckoo's Calling, because of who wrote it, got really played up. And I didn't think that it kind of lived up to
the hype.
The hype about it. I didn't think it was a bad book necessarily, but it definitely was not as blow me away as I thought it was going to be. So
my pick for this, and I want to preface with that it's also not like an awful book. It's just I feel like it was so overhyped on Book Talk, through everyone else talking about it, and with the TV show. My pick was also Shadow and Bone, and it's not that I disliked it, it's just it fell a little flat for me. I was expecting a lot more, and once I actually read it, it didn't hit the points that I guess I wanted to hit. And then I actually, for once, enjoyed the TV series more than I actually enjoyed the book, surprisingly.
Yup.
And what saved the book for me, honestly, was the world. I loved the world. I loved the magic system that she wrote, just the world. I loved the universe that she made. I absolutely was not a fan of the main character. She's actually really annoying to me in a lot of parts. And not like, oh, she's doing it on purpose, or like she's a morally gray character. No, she's just dumb. And then you get like this, like, I would even say like maybe 40% of the book, like training montage of how crappy she was and then learning to be better. And it was so boring to read that. Whereas in the TV series, they made that much more interesting and really didn't have that. So that's why this is my pick. It's not a bad book. I still want to read the rest of the series because I heard it, which is funny because a lot of people say it gets a lot better. So I don't know what that says about that, but that's what I'm hoping for the series. And I'm still going to read the other ones in the series. It's just, I read a lot of really good books last year in 2021. And unfortunately, this was not it.
So let's hop back to the other side of the spectrum and talk about our number 4 best book.
Okay, so my number 4 that I put, and again, I'm kind of limiting myself because normally I would read quite a bit for pleasure prior to having my daughter, and so really I've just been reading for the podcast, and so all of my books are ones that you can also, go to our other episodes and hear more reviews on. But my number 4
shameless
one,
plug.
yes. But When We Believed in Mermaids, I put it as number 4. It wasn't like my most favorite of 2021, but I think that it deserved to be on the best side because I liked the characters, I liked the writing style, I enjoyed the plot, and I just overall, it was a enjoyable book to read. And I think I gave it a pretty high rating too. So that was my number 4.
So mine is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I didn't think I was going to like it so much because, once again, Book Talk like really, really hyped this book, and I always feel a little trepidation whenever we get a Book Talk or someone from or Book Talk people really hype up books, because I feel like maybe it's not that great or it's not a genre that I enjoy. And I know this book, V. Schwab said that it's a lot different than most of her books, and it really was. Like, did it have a little bit of fantasy elements? It did, but at the end of the day, it's a story about a girl and a curse, essentially. And I didn't think I would like it as much as I did, and I just think it really showed her writing prowess. Like, she is a hell of a writer. She's a beautiful writer. The way that she can paint a picture in your head with just words was amazing, and I really, really loved it. I loved the characters. They're beautifully flawed. I don't think they were perfect. I hate when characters are overly perfect. I loved I don't want to get into any spoilers, but just the overall plot was really good, and the characters and the stories and motivations of characters and side characters, I really enjoyed it for the most part. That's why it's my number 4.
Hi, and my number 4 best book was Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I really enjoyed Gideon the Ninth. It was different, very different for a fantasy book. I loved the characters. I loved the world. It was just it's a very unique book. I gave it very high ratings in the podcast, and it had to be on this list. So number 4 best book for me. So now back to the dark side, so to speak.
Once again, the numbering does not make sense.
Number 2 worst book of 2021.
So this one I read, it wasn't a podcast book, and it's called The 7 or 8 Deaths of Stella Fortuna, and the jacket cover for the book is very misleading. I was expecting more of kind of a satire or comedy, and it was not at all that. It was very serious and drama filled, and there were some scenes I was not a fan of and things that I was kind of just tired of reading, and it really slogged. It was kind of boring. The only thing I liked about it was that it took place in Italy. Part of it took place in Italy, and it's about an Italian family, so I really enjoyed that. But outside of that, it was just not great. Just not a great book. I do not recommend this book at all. So that's my pick.
So my number 2 worst book was Lauren's number 4 best book. I really did not like.
Oh, I didn't see that. I just now noticed that.
Really did not like When We Believe in Mermaids.
Hey, to each their own, man.
Yeah,
and that's what I was going to say. It's nothing against the author or the book. I think that there's an audience for it, and
you're not it.
It's not me.
You're not it.
I'm not the audience. I didn't hate the book. It's not like I was like, I can't do this. It's horrible. Like the writing was good. It's just not. I like Barbara just said. There is an audience, and that audience is not me.
That's fair. So I literally wrote that I can't think of anything else for the worst book, which is partially true. I'm sure I've read some bad books in 2021, but because of my limited reading time, hopefully I'm going to do better in 2022. We'll see. Yeah, just being limited to the podcast books that we've done, and I'm kind of looking back over those. I really did not. I did not select a number 2 worst book.
Maybe it's a good thing because it's like you maybe didn't read really crappy books for the podcast, but they weren't like super great either, so they're neutral. So I guess it's a good thing it didn't make the crappy list.
Well, yeah, because I looked at a lot of them and I was like, well, I mean, I didn't love that book. Like, would I reread it? Probably not. But like, does it deserve to be on a worst book list? No. So I opted to just not put anything on this one. So
that's fair. So moving on from that, we're getting into the top 3 best books for us for 2021. And we're going to start with number 3. And my number 3 best book of 2021 was City of Brass. I loved City of Brass. It was recommended to us by a friend of mine. And I think we bought the second book, right, Barbara? We own the second book in this series.
Yeah, I bought it. Like as soon as I was like, oh, buy. It was on sale, and I was like,
Man,
oh, must have.
such a good book. Can't recommend it more. It was, the story was amazing. The characters were amazing. The world was amazing. It was so refreshing to see a fantasy story set in a non-traditional fantasy world with non-traditional fantasy characters.
Let's be honest, white people and European. That's what we're saying.
I loved it. I'm excited to read the other 2 books, and I'm sure we'll do a bonus episode for those as we read them, maybe. But yeah, City of Brass was my number 3.
Well, I'll talk about City of Brass later, but my number 3 was 13, which I think was Barbara's
fifth
one.
It made the list for me.
Made the list. I really liked 13. And that is, like when they say, oh, there's an audience for it, that's me. 13 combined all of the genres that I read regularly. The crime, the lawyer stuff,
the murder,
the
great villain that we love,
wonderful villain, just really good plot, really good twists and turns, without spoilers. Just the point of view of the book was really geniusly done too. So yeah, I really appreciate, and I can't remember who recommended it to us now, but I appreciate whoever did for the podcast. And yeah, that definitely was up there in my, I would say not even just in 2021, but just in general, one of my,
oh wow, really?
That I really enjoyed, yeah. It'll make my top 30.
Mine would be Realmbreaker, number 1 in Realmbreaker series. I don't know if it's called something else now that I think about it, but we read this we did a bonus episode on this. Michael and I did, and then we technically read it to be featured in a different podcast. Should go check that out as well. And I really, really liked it. I liked the characters. I liked the plot and the fantasy aspect. It was nice to see badass women, because it's rare to see fantasy books with women characters that aren't just there for plot points or for men to ogle over, whatever, however you say that word. But that's why I really liked it. I thought it was well written, and I cannot wait for the second book in the series to come out, and it's definitely in my TBR. Let's be honest, all these books are like in a series, and they're all in my TBR list. It's just a never-ending list of great books to read, and yeah, I'm just excited to read the second one, and I really, really liked it and love the characters and the plot.
All right, so now we're going to wrap up our list for worst books of 2021 by talking about the worst book of 2021.
This cracked me up.
Oh,
It is pretty funny. Lauren, you want to kick us off?
Do you want to give us the honors?
So I chose for the worst book of 2021.
Should we all say it together?
Yeah, we literally all three chose
unanimous.
The same book.
Unanimous.
Let's all try and say it together on three. 3, 2, 1.
You literally said on 3 and then counted off.
You did say on 3.
1, 2, 3. The Southern Book Club Guide for
slaying vampires, Michael.
Man, it was, and shameless plug here. Just because the book was bad doesn't mean the podcast was. So take a listen if you want to. It was actually our most recent episode.
Yep.
Before this one will air, and
it's a hell of a way to end the year, man.
It was. Yeah. There were some good things about it, but overall, it was just not great. Not good characters. Only one character in the whole thing had a character arc, really.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
yeah. Mm-hmm. I was so bummed. I was so looking forward to reading that book too. Like it just sounded like it was going to be right up my alley.
The name of the book, the back of the book, like everything was like hyping this book up, and it just fell flat, and it was not great.
I mean, the one spoiler alert that I will give people is you can just take the S off the end of the title if you want a more realistic description of at least the vampire.
And there's no guide either. Another spoiler. There's no guide. It's just not great.
So I thought that was pretty funny that was all 3 of our worst books of 2021.
That is funny.
It was not great. Not a great book.
Not at
and
all.
It's unfortunate. Like, the author can write well. Like, he's not a bad writer. Like, I enjoyed the way he wrote, but it was just
the writing style wasn't bad.
There's just that redeeming quality didn't redeem all the trash of what happened. Like, crap characters, not great character arcs for anyone, but like really, like Lauren said, like one character, the bad guy was okay, but then he did some crap stuff that none of us enjoyed and thought was not needed. So that kind of took that good aspect of a well-written bad character out. Like, the side characters none of them were great. None of them were memorable. So it's just kind of like not great. Not overall, not a good book. That's my 2 cents for that one.
Yep. So that's the end of our worst book list. Let's get back to our best book list. Talk about number 1 and number 2. So first, obviously, let's do the number 2 best book of 2021.
Mine would be City of Brass. I really, really, really like this. I mean, it obviously all 3 of us did because it made all of our lists in different sections or different parts. But it's still, to make all of 3 of our lists, I think that's the only book that did actually make all 3 of ours. So that just proves to you how good of a book it is.
Oh, no, the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires.
But in the bad category. So it's not something to be proud of. But it was just refreshing. Like, I loved the setting, and like Michael mentioned, like, it's nice to read a fantasy novel that isn't your stereotypical European-esque, where that's the what is the word I'm looking for, Michael? Like, where they wanted to get like, obviously fantasy books aren't based in realism, or like some of them are, but it's like, like dragons trope? And no, not a trope. Like, most fantasy books are based off of European, like,
folklore.
Not folklore, bro. From the like old, like, dark times and stuff, when you had horses and swords and chainmail. What is that called?
The Middle Ages.
Well,
medieval times.
Sure. You know what? Thank you for participating in my craptastic way of trying to say things. Anyways, it's refreshing to read a book that is not based off of European medieval times, I guess. That's not what I'm trying to say, but I'm not going to spend 20,000 years trying to figure out what I'm actually trying to say. But I loved the characters. I loved the plot. I loved the setting. I loved learning about the background of where she got the ideas from the books and learning more about the culture and all of these things. Loved it. Obviously, I bought the second book. I will be reading it. I'm hoping there's no hoping I will be reading the second one this year and hopefully the third. I just have a lot of books to read and a lot of series, but it's going to happen because I really, really liked it. And I was so excited to read the rest, especially because the series is completed. They're all out and I can just gobble up the whole series now. So. Nom, nom, chomp, chomp, chomp.
So for me, my number 2 best book was Realm Breaker by Victoria Aveyard. It's the first book in the Realm Breaker series, as Barbara mentioned. Absolutely loved it. It, as those of you that have been listening for a while know, I love Lord of the Rings, and Victoria Aveyard even said in an interview this was her love letter to Tolkien, and it's very much a Lord of the Rings-esque adventure.
Grand adventure,
the party. You know, it was really, really good. It was so enjoyable to read. I couldn't recommend it more to those of you that like fantasy. And really, I think that if you're not a huge fantasy fan, you might even like this one because it's just that good to me. Yeah, it was amazing. 5 stars I gave it on on Goodreads. It's one of the highest rated books I had of 2021.
So for me, my number 2 best book was the same as Barbara's. City of Brass, which again was one of the ones we read for the podcast. I liked it for literally all of the reasons that Michael already mentioned earlier and that Barbara mentioned now. I am not like a high fantasy, crazy, like Michael-esque. Like
you can put me in that category because I actually, now that I think about it, I read a lot of fantasy books.
I'm doing so much better after the podcast of enjoying fantasy
a whole new
books.
World for you.
I know. Well, and I liked Elantris, and there's been several that I would never have picked up and read myself, but have enjoyed. But City of Brass was just really good, and like Barbara was saying, it's, it's refreshing to not have roots in the European.
That's it. That's what I was trying to say. Like the roots and like where they got not the idea, man. I need to like influence. I'm gonna come the influence. That's the word. Yes, Lord. Yes, the influence. It's not influenced by European culture. Hail, yeah. Lauren, for the word that I was trying to remember.
I do what I can. But yeah, it had amazing characters. The world was amazing. The action was great. I didn't feel like I was ever bored. There were obviously like slower sections, but it definitely kept me interested, which is, for me, that's big for that type of book.
I was gonna say for fantasy books, that's saying a lot.
Because sometimes, like even with Elantris, I ended up liking that one in the end, but I did not like it at first. Like I was like, oh my gosh, Michael, what did you choose? So anyway, that was my number 2.
All right, it's time. Drum roll, please. Best book. Perfect. That's you guys should be sound effects people. That was such an accurate drum roll.
We should
try.
We finally made it. The best book of 2021, at least for us, the best book of 2021. For me, it was an easy choice. The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. It's the first book in the Stormlight Archive. Can't say enough positive things about this book. It was, the characters are awesome. The world is awesome. The magic system is awesome. Why are you guys laughing on video right now?
We're just making funny faces to each other because we haven't read this book, so we have no idea what it is.
Fair enough.
That's all.
Yes. I know Brandon Sanderson.
I would recommend it to both of you. I mean, you guys both liked Elantris. I know it's not likely you'll pick up this one and because of the length, it's like 1,000 pages, but
it's more the fact that it is like it's a planned like 20 arc series, and ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be 10. I believe.
Yeah, 10 with over 1,000 pages. Like that's just a lot. Like I love some big books, but like not 10 big books, because at this point you're just dragging out the damn story.
And somehow Brandon Sanderson manages to write it in a way where it doesn't feel like he's dragging out the story. Looking at you, Stephen King. And it's just, I can't recommend it high enough. If you love fantasy, you'd love this. I own all 4 of the books that are out and plan to try to read at least some of the other 3 this year. I think it took me, what was it, like 3 or 4 months to read this one in between.
It took you a long ass time.
Other podcast books. So I was trying to squeeze it in between. But that's my best book of 2021.
My best book of 2021 was The Alice Network. And that was also a podcast book. I really enjoyed it. I liked the historical aspect of it. I liked that there were multiple badass female characters represented. The storyline was just really good. I just would highly recommend it. If you want more spoilers, you can listen to our podcast on the Alice Network.
Wink.
But yeah, I thought it was really good. Even the supporting characters had character arcs. Everybody, I mean, everything was just really well written. And so when I was looking back over which ones I could say, like, I truly, man, like, that was a really good, it was between City of Brass and the Alice Network. So the order on my top 2 are kind of interchangeable. But yeah, I really enjoyed that one.
I feel like this year I read a lot of good books. It was really hard to just pick 5 of the ones that I really liked, because I feel like in 2020 it would be the opposite. Like, I would have no trouble picking some of the bad books versus like really good books. 2020. But in 2021 I feel like I read a lot of good ones. So this was hard. But my favorite would be Gideon the Ninth, which is also in a series called the Locked Tomb series. It's number 1 in it. And I just absolutely fell in love with this book. It's all the genres that I like in one book. And I've never read a book quite like this before that, because I kind of have a wide spectrum of genres that I like. Like, I like fantasy or high fantasy, which I didn't realize I liked that until we started doing the podcast. I really like bits of science fiction. I like murder mysteries, and that this book literally had all of them. And the author, I'm like, whoever was her publicist, or had to like be like, what genre are you picking? Like, it would be really hard to pick a genre for this book, because it really is all over the place. I absolutely loved the characters. I loved the plot. I loved the humor in it. It's my type of humor. I just really, there wasn't anything I disliked about the book except that it ended. That's what I disliked. I just could not get enough of this book. So that's my favorite book. I think everyone should read it if you like different genres like I do and enjoy that, and you have kind of maybe a dark sense of humor, because I do. And it even had a little bit of like gothic horror in it too. Love that crap. Like, love everything about this book. It's great. I cannot wait to read the second book that's already out, and the third book, I think she just announced it that it's going to come out in sometime in 2022, and I cried tears of joy and frustration because I have to wait that long, so that I'm putting off reading the second one, because as soon as I read the second one, it's over. Then I have to wait the dreaded amount of waiting for books to come out, and that's like my least favorite thing to do in the world, is waiting for books to come out that I'm really excited for, as every reader knows the pains that we go through for this. But that is my book. Freaking cannot recommend it enough. Loved it.
So there you have it. It's the Badass Literature Society's top 5 books of 2021 and bottom 3 books of 2021.
Have feedback about today's episode? Contact us by writing to badassliteraturesociety@gmail.com. You can also send us a DM or leave a comment on Instagram or Facebook.
And make sure you're following Badass Literature for free in your favorite podcast app. Give us a rating and leave us a review if they allow you to. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. Our username is BadassLitPod on Instagram and Facebook. And with that, we'll see you guys next time. I'm Michael.
I'm Barbara.
I'm Lauren.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.